presentation. Thank you, Dashina, Dr. Rita, for inviting us to this platform for our AIDS Education Month 2023. We decided that we needed to have a focus on Black cisgender women thriving beyond our HIV diagnosis. What we're seeing is that, we're aging with HIV. And before we get into that, let me introduce myself. My name is Teresa Sullivan. I use she and her pronouns. I am the Director of HIV Prevention and Education for Philadelphia Fight. That's one of the many hats that I wear. And I bring myself to this work as a woman living with and thriving and over 50, living with HIV. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to my co-presenter to introduce herself.
Good morning, everybody. I am Grace Ruther. I'm excited to be here and thank you for joining us for this presentation. I am the Deputy Director, Teach and Ancillary Service, and Teach, as you know, or you may know, is treatment education activists combating HIV. We deal mostly with education. We have several Teach programs, including Frontline Teach, Women's Teach, Youth Teach, our Core Teach, our Teach Expansion, which is out in the suburbs. And you're welcome to register for any of the teachers if you're in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I am a person thriving or aging with HIV for the last 40 years. And we will share our stories as the presentation goes on. Back to you, Teresa.
Thank you, Grace. It's amazing that Grace can actually say that she is a woman who's been living and thriving past 40 years. There was a time in this epidemic that we would never thought that we'll see anyone live with HIV past a decade. So next slide, please. So but before I begin, I just want to ground us with some statistics, and then I'm going to ask a question. So by 2030, up to 70% of all people, women included, everyone living with HIV, will be over the age of 50. We will be the first generation that live past the age of 50 by 2030. So that's 70%. That's a lot of people that be living with HIV past 50. So our needs are going to change. We're going to need more care services for people who are aging. Geriatric care is one of the things that we're going to look at that we're going to need as we age with HIV. Housing is going to become an issue. And also we're going to have some other clinical challenges. So aging with HIV for Black cisgender women, this is going to be the time where we're going to open up the chat box for this activity in a little bit. What are some of the clinical challenges or social challenges that you see that women are going to need as we age with HIV past 50? This is the time to open up for the chat box and put your answers in the chat box. So when we talk about challenges, when the clinical challenges, we're talking about challenges as we age with HIV past just taking your ARVs. As you age, we're going to need other medications that's going to be part of our regimens to stay healthy and thriving. And when we're talking about clinical challenges, one of the things that I'm seeing that a lot of people, especially women who are like being the frontiers of taking care of family, children, grandkids, is polypharmacy. And polypharmacy basically talks about multiple pills for different clinical health issues they need. Okay, I see someone said in the chat box, mental health. Absolutely right, right? As we age with HIV, right? Making sure that one of our challenges that we deal with and get services for is our mental health. Thank you for that, Lovey. And when we talk about social challenges, we're talking about living and thriving in our as we age with HIV. What we see, and we'll talk more about this in our presentation, about self-isolation as we age with HIV, right? Disconnecting ourselves from social networks, right? And that could have its own challenges for women living with HIV. Well, one of those main things that we're seeing is adherence to your medications, right? Or self-isolating into some place where you're being vulnerable and open yourself up to a intimate partner violence relationships. and that if you don't have any social networks, how do people know how to support you, and how do you get the support that you need if that's what's happening to you? Let me check the chat box to see if there's any more questions in there. Okay. So is there anyone else who wants to put anything in the chat box as a social or clinical challenge that you think is important that we need to examine as Black women, cisgender women aging and thriving behind our HIV diagnosis? Okay, so that was good. We're going to close the chat box. Oh, okay, intimacy. Okay, yes, intimacy is one thing, right? When we talk about relationships, and intimacy can look different ways. It's not always about the sexual contact relationship. It's about wanting to be loved, wanting to be in a partnership, sharing your rest of your life with someone who shares the same values and have the same things and goals and dreams that you have, right? Not about just about sex. It's about having a partnership and having a purpose and sharing that purpose with someone in your life. Someone also said dealing with side effects or long-term use of ARVs, very important topic that we want to talk about. Because like long-term of ARVs medication has its own challenges too, where we're going to talk about it later in this presentation about information and how information can be a damaging thing to other parts of our bodies and will open us up to other illnesses and diseases as a challenge. Thank you for that. Anyone else? Okay, those were great questions. Mental health, being in an intimate partner relationship, intimacy, right? Beyond just sex, right? We're not putting sex on the back burner because just because we're living with HIV and past 50, we're still having sex. But we want to have safe sex. We want to be able to have conversations about what we want and what we don't want in those relationships. And side effects of medication is one of the big things that we're seeing as a challenge with our healthcare and other illnesses that could be onsetted by the information due to long-term ARV medications. For those who don't know, ARVs are antiretroviral medications. All right, we're going to close the chat box for the sake of time, and we're going to move on with our presentation. So, clinical data for cis women long-term survivors of HIV. This gets at just what someone just said, right? You know, we got clinical data to suggest that aging with HIV becomes a significant public health safety measure and a challenge, right? Because we were just thinking back in the beginning that people living with HIV, let alone women and Black women living with HIV, will live decades of living with HIV. Now it's becoming a challenge because we don't have the resources and the access to them that we need now that we know because of advancement of medication, we're living longer, and that's a good thing, right? But we also need to have resources and access to the things we need as we age, right? Just like anyone else that's aging, regardless of being HIV positive or not. But we tend to age and have other complications as we age with HIV that needs to be addressed. The basic standard for care for cis women living with HIV needs to be able to care for the elderly, manage our HIV infection, and prevent any early onset of multiple mobility, such as cancers screening, and making sure that we're being screened for other things that will put us more at risk, right, as women living with HIV. Today's care for people living with HIV consists of controlling our HIV replication inside of our bodies, making sure that everyone can get to an undetectable viral load, which is like less than 20 copies of the virus inside their bodies. You know, that's a great thing, and the medication can get you there to a normal level and restore that person's immune system back to a healthy part of the immune system and put them less at risk for any opportunities of infection. However, just getting your viral load down is one part of what we need as we age with HIV. But there's other critical issues and the long-term care of those living with HIV and aging. As I mentioned, especially for women, making sure that we got access to cancer screening, getting our pap smears done, our mammograms done. The HIV community lives longer terms immune activation inside our bodies. Like I said earlier, what sets us into where we're constantly putting this medication into our bodies, but the long-term side effects to that is inflammation. And information you can sit into other parts of our organs, our vital organs, and cause other offset damaging to those tissues, like liver. And a lot of people are seeing women living with HIV having a comorbidity of liver cancer, right, at the age with HIV. So there are some damaging things that we need to think about and make sure that we are planning ahead to make sure that we are getting a screen for all these things as we age as cis women. And 218 Black women made up to 13% of the population, but yet we are 58% of the epidemic in the United States, right? That's living with HIV. And a lot of those, that 58%, are women late in their age getting diagnosed with HIV, and not just HIV, they're being diagnosed with an AIDS condition, right? So there are some onset things that already took place because they didn't think they were at risk because of their age. Next slide. So growing old, and we all are going to grow old at some point, but this topic is talking about growing old and living with HIV and how to thrive past that. People over age of 50 with HIV make up 46.8% of the 500,000, 1,000,000.2 actually, of people who are on the Y&Y program. But in 2018, what we did see was 92.2% of all those people receiving those services over the age of 50 were virally suppressed, and that's great. That's one of the things that was part of the EHE, which is end the epidemic, HIV epidemic by 2030, is to get people virally suppressed. But it's like I said earlier, that's just one part, a piece that's really important. But it's other things that women living with HIV have to have access to, other than just talking about the medication, which was higher than the national Y&Y average, which was 88.1. That's great, right? But living with HIV presents all kinds of other challenges. And we're going to get into that today during our presentation, no matter what age you are. Older Black women with HIV might face different issues with the younger counterparts, including greater social isolation, loneliness, feeling that they're not worthy to be in a relationship, or simply because they disconnect themselves from the community, they start to self-isolate, right? Stigma is also a particular concern amongst older people living with HIV, right? When you're HIV positive and you're in your 50s and 60s and 70s, you don't want to share that information, right? And stigma has always been the forefront of why people don't link to care, stay in care, and know their diagnosis. Stigma is a negative affects people's quality of life, how they see themselves, how they behave, and may prevent some disclosure issues. Like I said earlier, people are feeling like HIV is so stigmatized, they don't want to seek support because of the shame and the self-image they have of themselves once they get that diagnosis, or seeking the health care or social service they need. So thank you so much for going to the next slide. So this is the slide that we talk about social determinants of health. A Black African cis women thriving beyond the HIV diagnosis. We need to check some boxes here, right? In order for us to check these boxes, women make sure these things are available to us. If not, we need to advocate for these things to our legislators. Economic stability. We need to make sure that we have enough money as we're aging with HIV to pay our rent, pay our mortgage, pay our bills. And if we have some medical coverage, which is important, we also need to make sure that we have to cover that out-of-pocket co-payments, right? Food, right? Clothing, all these things don't change because you're living with HIV, right? But when you age, and you're working, and you go into retirement, which we're going to talk about a little in this presentation, is that the economic stability changes over time. We want to make sure that women, who are living with HIV has the education, the comprehensive education about living with HIV and have access to it, right? So they can live a quality of life. Healthcare is important and long-term care past 50. Like I said earlier, as we age with HIV, what we're seeing is people living beyond 72 years of age. And then we go into a part of our lives, which is geriatric care. And there's no setup in the legislative policy about what is needed for this growing aging population. So it's up to us to fight for it and making sure it's part of the national EHE and then the HIV epidemic before 2020. There's several pedals that we need to make sure that women are part of, and that it is specifically talking about what we need and making sure that we have access to it. Social community, making sure that we're connected to, our families, our children, our grandchildren, but more importantly, that we're connected to networks of people living with HIV. So we're not feeling that we're living with HIV by ourselves, and that there is a network of people living with HIV that support each other, right? And the environment. And the environment is important because when I talk about environment, I'm not just talking about the outsides, the trees and the grass. I'm talking about the environment in which a person lives in, the house, right? The people they're connected to, right? Making sure those environments are safe, right? And they have access to any services they need if they're not safe, right? Making sure that they have stable, affordable housing that they can afford to pay for, and making sure the environment in which they live in, they can thrive. Next slide. Let's put it all together. It's important for us to consider what is needed for women living with HIV, just like anyone else. We need housing. It needs to be safe for us as older people. Do we have access to service that we need, such as transportation? Do we have mobility issues that won't allow for us to catch a bus? Or are there other services that can pick us up, take us to our clinics, right? Bring us back home, right? And as we drive, we need to consider, am I able to drive as I'm aging with HIV? Because we lose some things when we age, regardless of HIV, but especially who I'm talking about women living with HIV, is our reflex to drive, right? Our eyesight might get a little worse as we age with HIV. So we want to check all those things to make sure that we have the transportation options that fit into our lives, right? And this is a big piece of what's happening in the southern states of poor women living with HIV. Because down in the southern states, if you do not have access to a car, it's very complicated and challenging to get from clinic to clinic for your HIV, let alone any other referrals that you might have that you need to have access to make sure that you're thriving and you're checking all those boxes about your health issues, right? So you know what's going on with you ahead of time, and it continues to be an issue. And thinking about, can I take care of myself? Do I need help? Do I need a healthcare aid? Am I willing to bring someone into my home for that? And who would that be? Would it be a family member? Will I have access to other services that do healthcare aid? Are those healthcare aids safe? Right? As will I make sure that I'm in an environment that I'm safe and people coming in my home are really caring people for me? What resources are available to keep me in my home if I do not choose to go to independent living? Everyone will not make the same decisions. So we need to have multiple options to fit everyone's needs. Some people might say, I want to stay in my home. I'm comfortable here. I'm 70 years old. I'm living with HIV. I'm comfortable in my house. I don't want to go anywhere. How do I stay in my house? And more importantly, how do I continue to pay my bills? Will I be able to support myself financially as I'm aging with HIV? Because what comes with aging with HIV is retirement. And we're going to talk more about that in this presentation. What does that look like? How do we make sure we offset, the things that we need to pay for as we go into retirement? Community services are available to assist women aging with HIV are out there, but it's just not enough. And more importantly is that women don't know what they are. It is not being directly told to us about what's out there for us, right? So it's up to us to make sure that we're being really directed to the people who can make sure those policies and access to services are out there, and having those conversations with them about what we want so we can continue to thrive. What works in our reality, our lives. And everyone's lives will not be the same, right? They might be similar because they were living with HIV, but they'll be different in many ways. And having a retirement plan in place. The time to think about retirement is now. I often see a lot of women say, oh, I'll get to it. And then before you know it, it's retirement time, right? And you have no plan. You didn't set up any kind of like plan to make sure that you had a financial stability, that you can continue to pay for your rent and your mortgage, if you have a mortgage, do and have access to talking to other services like Social Security, which my co-presenter will talk about later on in this presentation. But to have a retirement plan is to have at least 5 to 10 years ahead of the time you retire. So the time to plan is now, not when it's time a year or two away from retirement. Think about it as paying it forward for yourself into your retirement plan. Next slide. So what will we need? We're going to need a couple of things. And this is not a full list. Let me just be clear on that. But these are the things that we want to focus on and make priorities or hierarchy of needs for women living with HIV. And so we can continue to thrive and be healthy and get all the supports that we need and live in a supportive environment that's loving and caring for us. Those things will include financial security, right? That means, do I need to go get on SSI? Do I have a pension plan? Do I know what the resources are out there? Stable, affordable housing, and it continues to be an issue as we age with HIV. It's an issue, period, but more so for people aging with HIV, right? Access to transportation. Do I have transportation needs, and what are they? And where can I get resources from if I don't want to drive a car? And if I do drive a car, am I able to drive a car as we age, right? Healthy food, very important for anyone living with HIV, right? Making sure that older people have access to food services like food banks, right? The SNAP program. And more importantly, what about our social connections? Making sure that we're staying connected, that we are not self-isolating ourselves because of our status, that we're staying connected to our community of people living with HIV and those who are not living with HIV, but support us. Where are all those connections at? Making sure that women are not self-isolating into a lonely place where they lose the ability to think they are worthy of living past 50, right? Talking about taking medications, right? Making sure that we have all those things are connected, right? Social connections are so important. I often say that people need people, right? Even as we age with HIV, we still need to be connected to people and connected to the services and have access to those, right? Because you could have connections and know about it, but do you have access to those services that you need as you're aging with HIV? Next slide. So some other social needs and based like healthy, loving relationships. And those relationships can look like, am I still connected to my children, my grandchildren? Do I have healthy relationships with my community members? Do I have connections to a network of people living with HIV? Making sure that you're connecting yourself and checking those boxes. Have a safer environment in which you live in so you can continue to thrive. Right, making sure that the environment that you live in could be where you live, the zip code you live in. Is it safe? Can you leave your house and feel safe as you're aging with HIV, or just aging, period, right? Are you able to make sure that because you're aging, that you are in an environment in which you live, that you are close to where you can go shop for food? Can you go shop for other things, right? Because past those 50 plus mark, we still need to have access to things that help us thrive, like shopping and supermarkets that's not far away from our homes, right? Shopping and other places that we need to go to make sure that we get our basic needs met. a sense of purpose in life, especially past the retirement. People want to feel like I still am worthy, I still have a purpose in life past my retirement. We want to make sure that people are addressing social and self-isolation, right? Making sure that they do not fall into a trauma part of their lives where they are not connecting, where they don't think they're worthy because there's so much stigma around living with HIV for older people. And like I said earlier, one of the things we're seeing is polypharmacy. Now we're taking our ARVs, but as we age, and like anyone else who ages, that we begin to see other comorbidities happening in our lives. Right? Are we getting screened for those things? Are we at high risk for those things? Do we know our family history about those things? And polypharmacy can set up a really challenging place for people to take multiple pills because people tend to have pill burden. And we want to make sure if people have to take multiple pills with multiple different illnesses or diseases, that they have access to nurses that can tell them about how to set it up so that you're taking your medications like you're supposed to, so you don't get confused. Like pill bottles are a real good way to make sure that you're taking the medications as prescribed and on time, right? That lowers some of that pill burden of polypharmacy, which, like I said, is taking multiple different pills for different illnesses. And that is a challenge. Thank you so much. This next slide, we're going to show a video. So just hang in there for us with the video. And we'll talk about the video after we show it. Just give us a minute so we can play the sound. And this video is going to talk about what I got when I talked about healthy relationships, right? And that, how women living with HIV are more vulnerable to intimate partner violence than the majority of women of different races. And we're going to show you that video. And why we show that video is that what we're seeing is a high prevalence of Black women being in these relationships. Just bear with us. We have some tech issues, but we're trying to resolve them.
Are you able to hear the video?
No, we're not able to hear the video.
Hold on.
Love is an action word. So one of the things, you can tell me you love me, but if you treat me differently, that is not love. There were so many red flags I chose to ignore. I didn't overlook them. I just ignored them.
A healthy relationship looks like having my own independence and my own voice.
My early ideas about healthy relationships were non-existent, very distorted. Raised by a single mom who had alcohol and mental health issues. And so to me, love was kind of emotional blackmail. You love her, but she treats you bad. So I didn't really have a really good concept of love. It felt like weakness. It didn't feel safe.
I guess like any other little girl, that I was this princess, and that I'm gonna find my prince, and he's gonna lift me off my feet, and we're gonna have this wonderful castle and a couple of kids, and I didn't have to work. And all little things that little girls dream of, right? I know when you're a little girl, you think that life is so good, but as you grow up, you find out it's different.
When I was starting today, when I was starting today, I was so lost, so very lost.
I zero converted while I was in a relationship, did not know it. And almost a year after that happened, I was single. And that's when I went through that 3-month process, you know, by myself and just thinking that I would never date again. I just knew that my life was over. Had learned my diagnosis, gotten into treatment, been undetectable for a few years. And this guy comes along. I had to share my diagnosis with him. So I put myself in like a pretty dangerous spot, you know, not knowing what his reaction would be. He was okay with the fact that I was trans, but I didn't know how he would react to finding out that I was living with HIV.
First, I tried to avoid him, then I told him, and he tested negative. And what happened for me was so interesting. Before I tested positive and he tested negative, I was this sexy woman. After he tested negative, the Christian in him came out, and God spared him because his mission was to work with me, the sinner woman. So I went from this sexy woman to a project, and it crushed me, you know, like, oh my God, I've lost my womanhood. And I clearly proceeded not to talk with him anymore, but it was devastating.
I was in a relationship when I first was diagnosed in 1996. And the person I was in a relationship happened to be my abuser. You know, used to tell me that, you know, no one's gonna love you like I'm gonna love you. No one's gonna want you because of your status. And I believed all those things that he said. Because of myself, I had like low self-esteem, you know, when I got that diagnosis, I thought my world was gonna crumble. And I wanted to be loved, you know, and here was this person that was willing to say that he loved me unconditionally, but there was some things attached to that.
I met my daughter's father when I was 13 or something, and he was abusive, and I stayed with him till I was 28. The first time I was hit at 17 was a sign, and it came out of the blue, and I did not go. We both used drugs together, and when I got about 27, I decided to get sober. And even though I wanted to be with him because I didn't know any other way, it wasn't good. It was just familiar. I realized one night to stay with him meant I had to stay in a world of drugs and alcohol because he was still using. And that was kind of the final straw. I did not want to live like that anymore. I wanted to show my daughter something different. And I called AA, I'm sure, and said I needed help. And I began to go to 12-step meetings. It took a long time to finally allow myself to be vulnerable with these people and let them help me. And they showed me what love was. They showed me love was power. They showed me that surrender was not weakness, and eventually supported me through going back to school, raising my daughter, and everything. I just didn't know how much help I really needed.
I can't count how many times I said, okay, let's give him a second chance. And I went back. But there was one last time where I decided to leave, and my abuser sent me to jail for leaving. So what I did while I was there is I connected myself to some other women in a support group of women that were there who were suffering from intimate partner violence just like me, and came strong. My abuser visited me in jail. If you come back home with me, I'll drop the charges. By then I didn't got all the support. I was really strong, and I was like, no, God got me. I kept telling myself that God got me, right? And I didn't go back. And a week later, they told me because he didn't show up in any of the courts hearings, they dropped the charges. It wasn't the way I wanted to get out, but I got out. And I got out with my life.
Lying, you know, what are you doing? You know, why are you not working? And why are you angry? Why are you angry at me? This is, you know, mental abuse. This is verbal abuse. And they got physical. You're not welcome here. And I cried as I said it. But I said it enough until I meant it. To leave that relationship, my strength came from the fact that he wasn't there.
Didn't know at the time that no one else could heal what was hurt, what was wrong.
Yoga led me back to the light. It was the beginning of the shift from darkness. In the beginning, it was that the breathing, the breath is everything. And I began to visualize who I wanted to be. I began to think I can be healthy, and my T cells doubled. Everything changed.
I didn't tell my story about my intimate partner violence relationship for years. The support and strength that supported me to heal through that process was family. My son was still alive at that time. His door was always open. Connect myself to PWN. A healthy relationship looks like having my own independence and my own voice. Mutual respect.
Absolutely trust, mutual respect, communication. Some of these are not things I do well.
I don't want that like across the room type thing, because that's like pheromone, like that chemical reactions, like, but I want something that's genuine. I want someone who is genuinely concerned about my well-being, someone who's gonna be like, hey, did you eat breakfast this morning? Have you eaten? Not like, where are you? What are you doing? Not that, but someone who's genuinely concerned about my health and well-being.
You're not alone. There's support and people just like you and women just like you. I'm one of them. I'm a woman living with HIV. And I'm not just a woman living with HIV. I'm a woman living, thriving with HIV.
I really relate to feeling scared, feeling angry, not wanting to live, being HIV positive. Everybody isn't ready to just be happy. Yeah, and we need to be there and just let them. And when you're ready, we got you.
All right, so that's the end of our video. I just want to say a couple of things before we move on to our presentation. If you paid attention to some of those slides, where we are saying that 44% of women living with HIV have experienced or will experience intimate partner violence relationship, right? So what we are seeing that what is that challenge that we need to fix? And that fix is making sure that Black women are getting the education around how to be in an environment or choosing healthy relationships, what they look like, but more importantly, what about PrEP, right? Because PrEP is one of the 3 pillars of ending the epidemic by 2030, right? Is PrEP for you, pre-approved prophylactic medication, right? For those who are negative. How do we make sure that Black cisgender women are knowledgeable where to get this, how to get this, and that yes, it's for you, right? So we can begin to make sure that these numbers that we're seeing, this high prevalence of Black women living with HIV starts to decrease, right? So one of the things I want to talk about that is that we need more access to preventive medications, and that let women and Black women know that, yes, it's for you as well. I'm not seeing enough social media campaigns or materials out there promoting it for Black women, and that is a gap that we can close, right? To make sure that we're telling people and legislators like, hey, this is what we need to see, making sure that we have meaningful, that's meaningful environment, people living with AIDS, part of those conversations at those tables that, we need to be sitting at, because nothing about us without us as Black women, right? So we want to make sure that we have all those things in place for us as we age with HIV. And talking about keeping women, especially specifically because I'm talking about Black women, not acquiring HIV. And one way to have that done is education, access, and promotion. Next slide. So thriving, okay, thank you. Okay, we're gonna get back to it, okay. Right, so let's talk about health disparities for Black women, right? The likelihood of a woman being diagnosed with HIV in her lifetime is significantly higher than our counterparts of white and Latino, by 1 in 4 for Black women, Latino 1 in 256, and for white women it's 1 in 991. That's a big gap, right? And in 2017, HIV was the 7th leading death for Black women aging between the age of 25 and 44. Now that might not be over 50, but that's still an issue that we have seen just a couple of years ago, that it was the 7th leading death. And when we're seeing a lot of Black women lose their lives in intimate partner violence relationships because of their status. Black women account for the greatest share of deaths among women with an HIV diagnosis in 2017, even though we are 58%, followed by white women, 21%, and followed by Latino by 15%. So there was a survey that was done on a national scale, and a couple of questions were asked of these groups of women that participated in the survey. And they were asked, when asked about their concerns personally about becoming infected with HIV or acquiring HIV, a survey of American women on HIV found that 21% of women in the United States that they were very, very concerned and somewhat concerned. An early survey also found that Black women in particular is much more likely to say that they are concerned more so than our white women's counterparts, and that we express a concern about immediate family members acquiring HIV. If we didn't acquire it ourselves, we see someone and we know someone in our family living with HIV in the Black population. Next slide. So here's a graphic. This figure 2 tells you and breaks it down in the data, right, about among women and girls in the United States, female population by race, right, in 2018. So the first chart you see is HIV diagnosis amongst women and girls. You will see that 58% of Black women today are living with HIV, right? Out of all the populations, the Latino 17, white 21, and the other stand for that, maybe Pacific Islands, right, or Asian populations living with HIV. But if you go over to the second chart and you look at the population of females in the United States, you'll see that 64% of people living in the United States who are female are 64% are white. But you'll see the disproportionately difference between Black women, which we're only 13% of the population, but yet we hold the bulk of the epidemic of living with HIV by 58%. That's unacceptable, right? So if we are going to truly address the epidemic and in the HIV epidemic strategy plan, then we need to do something to lower those numbers of women acquiring HIV. 58% is more half of what we see in the United States, 1.2 million people live with HIV. And we see that the population of Blacks is only 13%. So there's a big difference and the proportion of how many people live in the United States by race, by who holds the bulk of living with HIV. And you go, it's clear that the bulk of people living with HIV is Black women, right? And after that is Black men, especially Black men who sleep with men, right? So, but you still see that disproportionate figure that's unacceptable, especially today. Then we have the tools, the prevention tools that we can like promote and make sure that there's awareness into those marginalized communities of Black communities and populations, specifically for Black women, that they have access to those resources, a knowledgeable access of how to and use those resources, and that it is for them as well, right? We don't see it in our community as much as we should. So we want to promote and make sure that we do it better. Because once we know better, we do better. Next slide. So now this is my chance to transfer these slides over to my co-presenter, Grace Ruther. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa, for that wonderful presentation. I'm just gonna ask our moderator to move on to the next slide. And as we talk about cisgender women aging with HIV, remember when we are talking of cisgender, we are talking of women who both self-identify their gender as female or as women, and their sex assigned at birth was reported as female. So we just want to be clear about that. So when we talk of comorbidities, a lot of us can check ourselves into these brackets. As we age, we get two or more illnesses. Generally, we have cardiovascular disease. You know that heart condition is the #1 killer. Heart-related illnesses is the #1 killer in the US. And then we have the liver disease. Again, liver disease is majorly related with some of our medications, especially our medications create a lot of creatinines, which overwork the liver. When we have non-HIV related cancers, we have throat cancers and a few other cancers. And then we have kidney disease. A lot of us in this age are doing dialysis and are having problems with incontinence. We have cognitive impairment and we have memory losses. Then we have osteoporosis that affects our mass density. We have loss of muscle and we have redistribution of fat. We have some sexy looking women who might be figure 8 and all that stuff they show in Hollywood. But for those of us who are realistic and down to earth, a lot of us have double stomachs. Stomach is supposed to be a little bit down, lower here, but you'll find most of us aging with HIV have a stomach up here, like we always have this extra tummy, and we are trying to hit the gym and lose weight all of the time. But a lot of it is to do with our comorbidities and redistribution of fat. Remember that redistribution of fat comes mostly with menopause. It's called menopausal fat due to the hormonal changes. Next slide, please. Affordable housing. This is a big headache. If you have affordable, safe housing, just thank your stars or thank your God or thank your inner higher power, because a lot of us have waited on the list. I remember being told I was number 54,000 in the list and that it was going to take up to 5 years for me to get housing. And I was in a shelter then. So you can imagine what that means. But what's important at the end of the day is that stable housing allows persons living with HIV and AIDS to access comprehensive health care and adhere to HIV treatment. Housing is #1 in the list of prevention. And then when you have stable housing, it means you're also under good health care, where you can be visited by our social workers, where you can have your family visit you, where you can safely keep your medications, where you can have your own privacy. The Office of HIV/AIDS Housing manages the housing opportunities for persons with AIDS. We now refer to AIDS as advanced HIV disease under the HOPWA program. So HOPWA is the only federal program dedicated to addressing the housing needs of low-income people living with HIV/AIDS and their families. And we're not just talking about stable housing, we're talking about safe housing. Like, how safe are you in your neighborhood? Are you able to even go to the corner store and get you some candy or some scratch card, whatever it is you do for your free time, or to get your basic needs? So there's lack of housing resources for people living with and aging with HIV, for an aging population that includes cis Black women. And we know that those of you who go to ComHAR or to other housing programs, those who go to Section 8, have seen people who are, my sisters who are aging with HIV, walking around with vouchers, but not able to get the housing. They have the voucher in their hands and they're asking around, oh, who knows where I can get housing. Next slide, please. Loneliness and isolation. Oh, this is a big, big deal. Loneliness may be accidental or it may be deliberate. You might just say, I lack my privacy. I was talking to an 80-year-old woman who was window shopping at Macy's on Friday. And it was the first time that she had been out of her house in 6 months. And I asked her, so she was lonely and she just wanted to chat with me. I guess it's easier to talk to a stranger than to talk to the people you know, because a stranger will not judge you or you'll not see them after that. But she said, I like privacy because I was always taking care of people. I've always taken care of everybody in my family, my relatives, my husband's relatives, my husband, my grandchildren. I've always taken care of people, and I've just hit, I do not want to take care of somebody anymore. I don't want anyone to visit me. I want my own space. And then I asked her, what's the challenge with that? Are you happy? And she said, yeah, it's kind of nice, but I cannot drive on my own anymore. I cannot do cleaning. I cannot do shoveling of the snow during winter. So I'm having these challenges. So I still have to meet people. So as Teresa said, people need people. But are you around the right people? They say that your worth is measured by the 3 people around you. What are your 3 friends or your 3 buddies or the 3 women or the 3 men around you like? Are they people who are supportive, who help you build your self-esteem, people you can laugh with and all that? So the effect of loneliness and isolation is comparable to the impact loneliness of well-known risk factors. Like loneliness is compared to risk factors such as obesity and has a similar influence as cigarette smoking. So imagine how serious that would be, because obesity is related to heart conditions, heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes. So loneliness is not just about being alone and isolating yourself from the rest of the world, but it results in obesity. One of the things that lonely people do, like I know times when I've been lonely, I like to eat a lot. I'm like, oh, let me make me some gravy, let me make me some snacks, let me eat some potato chips, let me watch some movies. And a lot of people who do not want to interact out like to stay at home and watch movies. They know every movie that's on Netflix, they're on Facebook, they're on TikTok, but you also sit a lot. And when you sit a lot, your body metabolism slows down and you're able to gain more fat. Loneliness increases mortality or your death rate by 26%. And as I've already said, it's associated with increased risk of developing coronary heart disease and stroke. And it also increases the risk of high blood pressure and it increases the risk for disability. But the good news is that it is preventable. So it's never too late. You can start interacting, go to the park and watch the dogs dancing, whatever you can do, just try not to be alone. And we have to differentiate between choosing to be alone. You can also be lonely in a relationship. You can be lonely within your family. So you have to identify those areas, and see how you can reach out. Next slide, please. We're going to go into the chat box with a short exercise, which says, what are other activities women can participate in to thrive beyond your HIV diagnosis, especially to avoid loneliness and isolation? So you can put your answers in the chat box and we shall go over some of the answers at the end of this presentation. What are the other activities women can participate in to thrive beyond their HIV diagnosis? Active activities besides sleeping, just watching movies, eating. What else are you able to do? So as you put your answers in the chat box or your suggestions, some of the things, if you have good ideas of how you're thriving with activities, please share with us. Oh, okay, I can see some answers coming in, but we'll refer to them at the end of the presentation. I can see some good ones there. Wow, I can see wonderful, wonderful activities. I can see people who have, I have a friend, I met a friend who just got a dog called Grace. So I was trying to get attached to the dog, but then I remembered that's not my dog, that's someone's dog. Like, what do you have that is yours that you can possess and prize? Yeah, I can see a few examples: yoga, Zumba, line dancing. Oh, wow, fishing. So we're going to discuss this, and you can give us some of your resources at the end of the presentation, but just keep them in. We're going to give you like a minute because we're going to close the chat box and go back to the presentation after you put down the activities. Did I see karaoke? No. Anything else? Any other activity? Did I see sex? Is sex an activity? I know a lot of us in this age are afraid to talk about sex. Okay, but we say, let's talk about sex. Let's talk about you and me. It's one of the activities that we people who are raging with HIV are afraid to talk about. Oh, it is an activity. Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of activities. Thank you. Let's go to the next slide, please. Yes, networking. That is one major activity as well. You can network by going to support groups. We just saw the different support groups. We have the National HIV and Aging Advocacy Network. And I wanted to talk about, I think the seropositive group have a happy hour once a week. You can check their website. National HIV and Aging Advocacy Network have seminars and activities. We have the Elder Initiative. They meet every week. They also meet on Zoom. Like if you cannot physically go out to a place because of disability or something affecting your mobility, you can actually do a lot of Zoom activities. And then we have the Reunion Project. It has an annual conference. We have all these groups. We have groups like NMAC that actually take you away to their training for 1 week. You're getting a free room. You're in a nice place. You have the Positive Women's Network. Sometimes they take you to the beach. We have book groups. You can join a book club. Positive Women's Network also have is it a happy hour or a sister hour every week where sisters just meet and pour themselves out. You can come into your room with coffee, wine, whatever it is, and just socialize. And also pour out. You can pour out your grief. You can pour out your joy. There's so much. So the group is not just about grief and loneliness. The group is also about sharing your resources. The more, the merrier. So NHAN has special groups that meet, and we'll discuss that at the end of the activity. Next slide, please. Remember, you can also be your own company. You can talk to yourself as long as the voices in your head are telling you to do good things. If the voices in your head are telling you things that are contrary, you should call your case manager, reach out to a sister or a friend. And then we come now to retirement. A lot of us are retired in our aging group, and some are planning to retire. And 50 plus, some of us are still quite active, but remember that those of us living with HIV age 10 years faster. Some people age very well, some people do not age too well, but we are still aging. One of the examples of an aging process is menopause. Once you, it's a biological activity that heightens your age. So whether you like it or not, you're aging faster in some ways. But what we need is how much will you need to retire? Like, are you prepared to retire? Some people would like to retire early at 62. There are some people who are working at 72 or at 80. I saw somebody who was very senior driving a train. But what's important is how much will you need to retire? Are you ready to retire? We've had a lot of people who are supposed to be retired back at work. And let us ask ourselves why. So when we talk of retirement, we're not just talking of retirement that is to do with money and bills, but have you also retired from your daily activities? Have you retired from things that gave you joy? Have you retired from the world? Like, are you giving up? But let's go to the retirement that's to do with Social Security, which is everyone's kind of headache. How much will you need when you retire? How much will you need to retire? As Teresa said earlier, you need at least 5 to 7 years plan. But a lot of times life happens and we just find that we are not able to save that much. We have to pay bills, we lose our housing. Sometimes our parents gave us their housing, but because we could not pay the land taxes, they took it away from us. So much happens. Sometimes we are in recovery and we sometimes made poor choices and just spent all the money we had. So paying it forward into a retirement plan is very important. The government website, Career Link, has advice for you on when to do retirement plans. Your HR office can also tell you how much to give to your TIAA, or if it's not TIAA, the 401k. And then when should I begin planning for my retirement? That's a question you should ask yourself if you are not yet retired. Where to find assistance with creating a retirement plan designed to my financial needs. So at the end of the day, Teresa will share some of these resources which we have at the end of the presentation. So what's your retirement plan? Do you have any? Let's move on to our next slide. Returning to work after retirement. Let's look at this case study. The desire to return to work after retirement is quite common. It is unfortunate that while those who you worked with over time are applying for, they're filling in forms with airlines, destinations, vacations. They want to go to Las Vegas and do whatever they can do there and let it stay there without telling anyone, whether it's gambling, whether it's a one-night stand. People want to go to Florida, people want to go to Disneyland, but instead of you or me filling in those travel plans and discounts with Expedia, we are filling in job resumes. We are looking for jobs everywhere. Instead of taking a train or a flight to our vaccination to the beach, we are taking Amtrak or SEPTA to the office. So the desire to return to work after retirement is now almost becoming an epidemic, whether driven by the desire for busy days and a sense of purpose or just financial stability. That the reality on the ground is we are not able to make money, enough money to save money for retirement. So let us look at Casey Cook, our case study for today, who retired after 30 years of service as an RN nurse at the age of 67. And then she was beginning to enjoy her retirement, wake up late, watch news, all the bad news going on in the world. A local clinic contacted her for a position as a nursing manager. So then she could not turn down this position. So she ended up going back to work. But she did not consider that returning to work experiences is stressful and demanding for women who are struggling with comorbidities, pre-existing conditions. See that among African American women, diabetes has reached epidemic proportions, with 1 in 4 Black women, 55 years and older, having diabetes. And diabetes is also one of the leading causes of death in the US. When we're talking of having comorbidities and pre-existing conditions and going back to work, let's say you're going back to work when you're 67 or 70, already you have this backache, you have this incontinence, you have to wear, the things we are shy to talk about, you have to wear Pampers and you're going back to work. And you're beginning to lose your self-esteem because you feel that people will talk about you in the office. Then you come to the office and find this digital generation Z, they're called Gen Z or Gen X, Gen Z, young people from college who just know how to touch computers. They touch this, they twist this. You're still thinking old school. So they're making you feel like you're not productive, like you're in the workplace And the workplace is where you spend more than 8 hours a day. It's where you spend almost most of your life. And you want to be safe. You want it to be a comfortable, safe space for you. You want people to interact with you, but people are avoiding you. They say you are old, your ideas are old, you know, you should be retired. So they stigma, and you're just seen as this retiree. So that's why it's important for you to have a good plan, a good financial plan, so that you do not get into that kind of awkward, chaotic situation. Next slide, please. Oh, we talk about parenting and caregiving. And for those of us aging with HIV, it appears like we never stop parenting. I know I lost my mother a year ago, and I just celebrated her memorial, her first memorial. But even at my age, I'm now 59, I'll be 60 next year. My mother, who was 92, I was still a child, but she was still parenting me. She was the only person I could talk to, look to for advice. Mom, I'm in this relationship, I'm not comfortable, what do I do? Oh, Mom, I'm so broke. I know you are older than me and you're retired, but I know you always save for a rainy day. Can you please help me out of this situation? I'm losing my housing. So parenting, those of us who are aging with HIV, we are always parenting to our kids, to our children, to our grandchildren, and to the community, to our nieces and nephews. But we cannot parent well if we do not have affordable and safe housing. We have our children and grandchildren who want to come and live with us, or even to care for us. As we age, we are afraid to talk about home care. You know, you need a place where someone can come and take care for you, because not everybody is willing or ready to go into independent housing or a nursing home, because some of the stories that we hear from there are not the best. But imagine working so hard over the years, paying your loans, paying your mortgage, buying all these beautiful walk-in bathrooms and these beautiful beds that can turn you left, right, you know, east, west. And then you find that you cannot even live in that home. You know, either you lose your housing because something happened along the way, or you are still in the list and you cannot get proper housing from our housing, our departments that work with housing. So safe housing is really paramount. We do really need it. Next. So before Teresa goes into finalize the resources and for you to ask questions, remember that you need to take care of yourself as someone aging with HIV, and that you can educate yourself with these resources. Education is so good because that is one way to advocate for yourself. Knowledge is power. You can choose your doctor, you can choose your case manager, you can choose your clinic, you can work with your case manager to get a DIFA and to determine whether the housing you're getting is in a safe place, or you're going to a high rise, or you're going to a place. Remember, people, places, and things. You're going to a place that may be a bad trigger for you. Okay. And also for women who are aging and going through menopause, talk to your doctor, because menopause is a main issue that sometimes affects us mentally, physically, psychologically. Remember, irregular periods, vaginal dryness that helps us lose our self-esteem, the hot flashes and chills, night sweats, sleep problems, mood changes, things that just really make you feel lonely and make you lose self-esteem and make you feel that you're no longer sexy and nobody can even look at you. And that we're afraid when we talk to the doctor, when you go to see your doctor and they ask you, when did you last have sex? You say, oh no, I'm old now. I don't do that sort of thing anymore, but you know very well that your body is aching. Maybe you need somebody, yeah. So let us go to Teresa, and thank you for the presentation and for listening to me for the references.
Thank you so much, Grace. That was an amazing job. So we do want to give you some references during our webinar. The first one we have is about where you can look at, get more information on topics for retirement. The second is to look at this landscape of the epidemic and how it impacts women, especially we're talking about Black women today, cisgender Black women today. And in the women's health, you can go there to get more information specifically for Pennsylvania. because we live in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. You can look at the surveillance report for HIV surveillance on a report on a national scale from the CDC, and you can go to cdc.gov. And we want more information on social determinants of health amongst adults with HIV infection for 2019. You can give us more data information that you can share or use for yourself. And finally, we know that the role of housing and ending the epidemic of HIV epidemic plan needs to be really specific at how it's going to impact women, cisgender women who are Black and African. And what is needed in the epidemic plan to make sure that we have a robust plan for housing as we age with HIV. Next slide.